This week, we are tackling a topic that Sommer has quite a bit of experience with some of our clients, and that is blind hiring. Now, we reference a Glassdoor article called "The Blind Hiring Process," what it is and how to do it. But Sommer, give us the high level definition of blind hiring process and why companies should be utilizing it.
Sure thing. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the term blind hiring process, in kind of the simplest explanation, it's really just removing those identifiable characteristics from a resume that aren't related to the job. So some examples would be like anything that may give you an indication of age, gender, ethnicity, potentially even level of education if it's not specifically related to the job. And a very big one is candidate names. So if you're not familiar with this process and you're hearing me say, hey, we can remove all of these off of the resume, I'm sure there's a little bit of reservation and potentially even some concerns like, well, hey, like, how are we going to know which candidate that is, or, more about their education. And I must say that, trust me when I tell you that not only are there an assortment of technology systems out there that can actually help you manage this process, but, I have a saying that's like, where there's a will, there's a way, Joey. And I think that it really just requires us to take a step back from what we know and what we've done for so long and kind of deconstruct the process so that we can reconstruct it in a way that supports hiring diversity.
Yeah, and here's the thing, Sommer. So there's a big Netflix show out there called The Tinder Swindler. Are you familiar with The Tinder Swindler?
No, okay. Please do tell me, because now I'm interested.
So The Tinder Swindler is all about this guy who fooled people into believing that he had this great life, and he was dating multiple women and hitting them up for large sums of money. It's a very fascinating thing to take a look at if you've got a couple of hours that you want to kill. Maybe, on the way to the golf course next time, or in the clubhouse. But anyway, what I wanted to say about the Tinder culture that we have today of swiping left and swiping right is that recruiters and HR have been trained many, many years ago to swipe left and swipe right on things that really don't matter, or things that have been at a disadvantage to people. So, Sommer, you mentioned a name, right? So if it's Mukesh, or if it is Lakeisha, a recruiter's going to swipe left, and that's not fair. If someone went to a high school in rural North Carolina and they did not go to college, they're going to swipe left because they don't feel that maybe they have the right qualifications or come from the right background. Or maybe if they didn't go to the right school. I remember there was a position that I was hired for one time because of the college I went to. But that, in effect, eliminated a lot of folks that could have competed for that role that did not go to the college that I went to. So we're almost, and I know this is like soundbitey here, but we're almost trying to untinderfy the recruiting process so that we can look at the credentials for what they are. And that is a win for diversity. That is a win for teams. That is a win for your culture. So if we can untinderfy the recruiting process, then we will have better hiring outcomes.
I like your explanation and keeping it quite simple, because it can feel overwhelming when, I think about small businesses just moving so quickly and having so much on their plate that even trying to stop to create a new process and change anything feels like, well, we don't have enough time to do that. So let's just keep doing what we're doing and we'll deal with it later. And, I do have to caution that if we don't start making this change now, I foresee in the not too distant future that we're going to have the companies that have been making steps and efforts towards improving their diversity. And then there's the companies who are lagging. And those that are lagging are going to be at a serious disadvantage for a couple of reasons. One is that companies with gender diversity at the executive level are proven to be 20% more profitable than those without. So if that isn't a reason alone, then think about how important diversity is to your potential employees. And the majority of employees, when they're seeking out a new opportunity, they are saying that they care about diversity. So aside from it just being the right thing to do as a whole, as a business owner, certainly there's these additional factors that you're not going to be able to ignore. So I think we should talk just a little bit on this topic about kind of how companies can put this into action and get them started on some ideas. What do you think?
Let's go for it.
All right, cool. So I would say first and foremost, before you attempt to do any of this, you really need to think about, as a company, what is the goal that you want to achieve? So, think about and run a report with the data that you have of what is the current makeup of your existing workforce for the factors that you may already have. Like you probably already have age and gender and name, and depending on your hiring process, you may even have additional information in regards to their level of education. Perhaps you've asked your team to complete some voluntary anonymous surveys to capture some other information. And if not, this is a great opportunity to do so, because as you start to understand your current workforce, you can then understand where your greatest opportunity is and then focus on what are our goals. Now, once you have those goals, then you can start to actually execute on it. And there's a couple of different ways, Joey, that I've seen companies tackle this on their day-to-day process. I mentioned some technology that's out there, but what other ideas do you have that might be simple for recruiters, business owners, anybody that's managing this process to put into play?
These days I'm going back to values before tactics, right? So I am thinking of making sure that it is a value within your organization to do this and understand the why behind a blind hiring process, so that whenever decisions need to be made about what you do to enact it, you lean towards the bias of getting it done as opposed to not getting it done. So I would maybe come up with 1 to 3 values that are important for you that reflect, wanting to increase diversity, wanting to increase opportunity and access, and realizing that this is a pathway to do it. So I would just start with the values piece. And then Sommer is like awesome with the tactics. I'm going to come at the values angle and start there, then build out your tactics.
But I think you make a really great point that there has to be a planning piece to this. Like just trying to jump in and say, hey, we heard that there's this technology we can buy and just run all of our applicants through it. And like now we have a diverse hiring process, and it's much more than that. So after you've done that planning stage and you understand what you want to achieve, there's a couple quick ways that you could tackle this depending on the size of your business. One is quite simply changing your hiring process and asking candidates to remove specific information from their application or resume that they're submitting. Now, of course, you have to have other methods in place to ensure that you can identify them in terms of contacting them, but that's not as difficult as it sounds. One of the other ideas that's actually referenced in the article that you touched on earlier is you can actually create pre-screening questions that can be answered before you have any of their identifiable characteristics on a resume. So that at least that way you are making decisions in regards to qualifying individuals off of the same exact questions without any sort of potential bias from information.